talk about the ISLM model. So before we start with the ISLM, we need to understand a very crucial concept, that is the concept of speculative demand. Speculative demand, which was given by Keynes. Okay, so what happens in speculative demand is that speculative demand means that the amount of money that we hold for profit. That is basically the key idea, that the amount of the money that we hold for profit. So we do not transact this money. We do not transact this money straight away. What we do is that we speculate our interest rate in the economy. We speculate our interest rate in the economy, and according to the interest rate, we decide how much we want. So now what the graph looks like for speculative demand is something like this, that we have our interest rate on our y-axis, and on x-axis we have the speculative money demand. So our graph is a downward sloping curve like this, which means that as our interest rate falls in the economy, we demand more money. That money kept in our accounts with the banks. So banks will be paying us interest rate. So when the interest rate will fall, we are not going to have that much profit. That is one point. That is one angle which you can think about. The another angle is on loans. If interest rate on loan falls, you will demand more loans, right? Then also you will increase your money demand. So there are two angles. One angle is that your savings bank account rates, if they fall, you will prefer to spend the money today only, right? And the another angle is that when your interest rate falls, you will want to demand more money for investments, because interest rate on loans is now lower. So from these 2 points of view, we can theoretically understand that why this graph is such downward sloping. Okay, now on this part of the graph, this part is inelastic part. Okay, there is infinite elasticity here. On this part of the graph, on the lower part of the graph, we have infinite elasticity. What infinite elasticity here means is that the interest rate is already so low. Interest rate has already fallen to such a low level that we do not expect it to fall any lower. So what we do is that we demand as much money as we want, as much money as we can. So that is why on this lower part of the money demand curve, the elasticity is infinite. Okay, that is what the meaning of infinite elasticity here is. Now what are total money demand? Our total money demand is given by MD equal to C1Y plus LR. This C1Y is your normal transactions demand for money. Transaction demand. This part, this LR part, this is your speculative demand. So basically it shows that your speculative demand is a function of your interest rate. That is, it is affected by the interest rate. What the level of interest rate in the economy is will determine your speculative demand. Okay, now we assume that our money demand function that we just did, it was like this. But for the simplicity and for making it easier to understand, we will assume that it is in fact a linear money demand curve. Okay, linear money demand, not the non-linear one. You can see the difference. This is non-linear one is curved and linear one is the straight line. LM curve. Now what we saw previously, previously we saw that we have this linear relationship, okay, C1y plus LR. Many times you will see that here a negative sign is there, which is more accurate. The reason is that there is a negative relation that is we saw before here also, that as our interest rate is falling, our money demand is increasing. So due to this negative relation, you can see a negative sign here in many references. So what happens now is that we have seen this graph, okay. So now money supply is fixed by the central bank. Money supply is not changing. Money supply is fixed by the central bank, okay. And we have our money demand function. Now I am writing here y1, that is money demand function at y1 level of income. This income level is y1, I am assuming this, and this is your r1 level of interest rate. Now as your y1 increases to y2, so this graph is, here it is money demand or quantity of money demanded, and here is your rate of interest. So as your y increases, as your output increases or as your income increases, you will tend to increase your money demand also. Now money demand can't move, this increase can't be represented by a shift on this MD line only. You have to shift the entire curve, because the graph is built on a plane where your x-axis is quantity of money demanded and y-axis is rate of interest. And when a factor changes that is not on the axis, not on either axis, you have to shift the curve, okay. This is basic thing. So this you get y2 here, okay, money demand for y2. Now this will also lead to your increase in interest rate. Now with increased interest rate, we can now formulate the LM curve. Now the LM curve is drawn on a RY plane, interest rate and output plane. So at y1 level of interest rate, we had r1 level of at y1 level of income, we have r1 level of interest rate. तो यहाँ पे ये आ जाएगा एक पॉइंट, ठीक है. We can say that this is point A and this is point B. तो यहाँ पे ये आ गया point A. Similarly assume that here is y2, तो y2 के साथ यहाँ पे r2 आ जाएगा, है ना. यहाँ पे मान लो point B ये वाला. When you join these both points, you get your LM curve. Okay. Now from LM curve, we have to calculate the slope of this LM curve also. Now what are slope can be calculated from the money demand function. So money demand was equal to C0 plus C1 y minus C2R. Okay. Now you will say that ये कहाँ से आ गया. मैं बताता हूँ ये कहाँ से आया. मनी डिमांड ये आ गई. C0 है हमारा ऑटोनोमस कंजम्पशन. ऑटोनॉमस कंजम्पशन का मतलब है कि वो कंजम्पशन जो हम करेंगे, बेसिक लेवल ऑफ कंजम्पशन जो है, जिस पे कि ना कि हमारी इनकम इफेक्ट करेगी, ना ही हमारा इंटरेस्ट रेट इफेक्ट करेगा, वो कंजम्पशन. दूसरा पार्ट है C1y. ये कहाँ से आया. ये आया हमारा इनकम और मार्जिनल प्रोपेंसिटी टू कंज्यूम से, कि हमने इनकम के हिसाब से कितनी, हम उसकी इनकम का कितना पार्ट हम कंज्यूम करेंगे, तो वो भी तो मनी डिमांड करनी पड़ेगी. और ये फाइनल पार्ट, this comes from our what we read just right now, speculative demand. This is transaction demand. Now we move to the calculation of the slope. Now this is the curve. So first we differentiate it with respect to the interest rate. So m को मैं ऐसे लिख रहा हूँ dm equal to, this is constant with respect to interest rate and this md, तो ये तो ज़ीरो आएगा. C1y भी यहाँ पर कांस्टेंट ही रहेगा, क्योंकि ना ही इसमें इंटरेस्ट रेट और ना ही मनी डिमांड है. इसमें आएगा माइनस C2 dr. सो dr अपॉन dm इज इक्वल टू माइनस 1 अपॉन C2. ओके. सिमिलरली हम इसको y की रिस्पेक्ट में भी डिफ्रेंशिएट कर लेंगे. dm इक्वल टू 0 प्लस C1 dy माइनस 0. सो dy बाई dr, सॉरी dy बाई dm, यहाँ पर हमारा आ जाएगा क्या, माइनस नहीं 1 अपॉन C1 है ना, ये आ जाएगा यहाँ पे. अब हम क्या करेंगे, नाउ व्हाट वी विल डू इज़ दैट वी विल क्रॉस मल्टीप्लाई दीज टू. So dm and dm will get cancelled, and we will get the slope of our LM curve as dy by dr equal to c1 upon c2. dy by dr upon c1 upon c2. Negative sign ko we will be ignoring here. Okay. So now moving ahead, there is a concept that arises from this LM curve only. There is a concept that arises from this LM curve only. That is the concept of liquidity trap. Liquidity, a very crucial, a very important concept. Now what we saw just a few minutes back, that this is our money demand, and we said that this part is very inelastic. Now this part also translates to our LM curve. This part also translates to our LM curve. Okay, LM curve बनाइए ऐसे, है ना. अब from linear we draw a linear curve, but this is non-linear, so we draw a non-linear curve here also, LM also. So LM will also look something like this. So this part is again the elastic part. Okay, so this part represents liquidity trap. What liquidity trap means? It means that people simply do not want to hold bonds as in they do not want to hold the you can say bonds or your savings or anything that is not being benefited anymore due to the low interest rates. They simply do not want to hold bonds and prefer other more liquid forms of money instead. Now why it is so? Because of this preference after converting bonds into cash, this causes an incidental but a significant decrease to the bond prices. When they are not demanding bond, when the demand for the bonds fall, there is a fall in the demand for there is a fall in the prices of the bonds. And this fall in the price of bonds, what will it lead to? It lead to increase in the yield of bond, because price of bond is inversely related to your yield of bond. Okay, price is inversely related to yield of bond. Okay, this is a related concept to this liquidity trap. Now at these low levels of interest rate, people have no incentive to invest. Okay, because the interest rate is not rewarding them. Okay, now this is a diagram that I have drawn for this liquidity trap. This part of the LM curve, this part shows us the wait a minute, yeah, this part shows us the liquidity trap. Okay, now what I have written here is that R here is already so low. R is so low that any increase in the money supply by the government, that is our monetary policy of the government, any increase in the money supply of the government will not reduce the interest rate. Here if you see, money supply कितना भी कर लो, interest rate will remain the same only, will not change the interest rate. And due to this, the monetary policy is going to be ineffective, as when interest rate is not changing, our output will also not change. So monetary policy will yield to the government nothing. Okay, now here we are talking about our IS curve. So our IS curve is also known as your investment saving decision curve. Okay, so now IS curve represents the equilibrium in goods market. Okay, goods market में जो equilibrium होता है, it is represented by your IS curve. So when your aggregate demand is equal to your income, your AD is equal to your income, that is when you have your that is when you get your points of the IS curve. Okay, so in Keynesian model we make interest rate an endogenous variable. What does this mean? This means that our interest rate is included in the model, that is your interest rate will affect your investment, and your investment is a part of your aggregate demand. Okay, your investment is a part of your aggregate demand. So your interest rate is an endogenous variable. Now what happens is that this is your this part, this shows your investment curve. Okay, this shows your investment curve. So what happens is, as your interest rate falls, your investment increases, because it gets cheaper to invest due to low interest rate. From borrowing point of view, if we think about it, तो अब इससे क्या होगा, ये तो आ गया एक एंगल इन्वेस्टमेंट कर्व वाला. ओके, नाउ द अनदर एंगल इज योर ए डी. वी सेड दैट आई एस कर्व होता है जहाँ पे योर इनकम इज इक्वल टू योर ए डी, राइट. सो ए डी क्या होता है, ए डी इज योर कंजम्पशन प्लस सी प्लस आई प्लस जी वाला. तो हम वी आर इग्नोरिंग हेयर गवर्नमेंट part, because we are assuming that there is no government sector here. Okay, we are assuming that there is no government sector. So C plus I naught, this is the curve. Okay, before this we have to understand that what this curve is. This is a 45-degree line which tells the points where your y is actually equal to your aggregate demand. So the point where your aggregate demand curves cut this point, these are going to be your equilibrium points. So now as your investment increases from I0 to I1, this part from I0 to I1, this goes here. Okay, these investments are going there. Your investment I0, investment I1, I2, I2. Okay, so all these investments. Now how is it increasing? It is increasing due to the interest rates, right? So यहाँ पर आई नॉट पे इंटरेस्ट रेट था आर नॉट, है ना. यहाँ पे इंटरेस्ट रेट था R1 एंड यहाँ पे इंटरेस्ट रेट था R2. सो इट मूव्स लाइक दिस. नाउ दिस ग्राफ gives us our IS curve. Now these points, point this, and point this. These represent two things. One is your output level and another is your interest rate. output interest rate. जब हमने LM कर्व करा तो वहाँ पर भी हमारा जो ग्राफ था, इट वॉज वाई हेयर एंड इंटरेस्ट रेट हेयर. तो हमें वाई और आर की फॉर्म में हमें वैल्यूज चाहिए थी एंड वी गॉट दोज वैल्यूज. ओके, सो नाउ सिंस वी हैव दिस वैल्यूज, वी विल प्लॉट आर graph. Okay, so this is your IS curve. Okay, this E naught point comes to your A point, this point comes to your B point, and this E2 point comes to this D point. So this is how you get your IS curve. Okay, so now moving ahead, we talk about the slope of this IS curve. So now it says that if your investment is steep, then your IS will be steep. Now how is it so, है ना, ये कैसे हो सकता है या ये कैसे हुआ. यहाँ पे अगर हम देखें, वी हैव दिस ग्राफ. इफ़ आर इन्वेस्टमेंट कर्व वॉज स्टीपर, लेट अस से लाइक दिस. ओके, इफ आर इन्वेस्टमेंट कर्व वॉज स्टीपर, सो देन आर interest rate changes would have been causing a small changes in investments, I0, I1, I2, very little changes in investment. Okay, if now these little changes will go to our AS, this our output AD graph. तो यहाँ पर भी क्या होता, यहाँ पर भी changes would have been very congested, है ना, changes would have been very close. So due to those close changes, our IS curve would have been more steeper, है ना, IS curve would have been more steeper, क्योंकि इंटरेस्ट रेट का गैप इतना ही है, समझ आया. सो बेसिकली योर investment curve, that is your relation of your interest rate to your investment from your investment curve will determine your slope of IS. So if your investment curve is steep, your IS will be steep. Now steep investment curve means that your investment is inelastic. Your investment is inelastic. Steep means inelastic, that is it is not responding much to changes in interest rate. Your investment is not responding much to changes in your interest rate. It is very similar to the situation that we had in our liquidity trap. There also our speculative demand was not changing to the changes in the interest rate. So that is what is happening here also. Okay, so moving ahead, what it says is that IS curve is negatively sloped. Okay, ये slope है ना, this is negative, downward sloping. IS curve is negatively sloped because increase in the interest rate causes investment spending to rise, है ना. Interest rate increase, what will it lead to? It will lead to will cause investment spending to rise, which shift the AD curve up and raises the equilibrium income level. एक मिनट, हाँ यहाँ पे I have written it wrong. Here it will be decrease. Decrease in the interest rate causes investment spending to rise, which shifts the AD curve up and raises the equilibrium level of income. Okay, as our investment is falling, as our interest rate is falling, I will write like this: interest rate is falling, investment is increasing. What will it do? Your AD curve, okay, from here AD curve will shift up, है ना. AD curve will shift up and equilibrium level of income will increase, right? Equilibrium level of income will increase. So what actually happened is that your rate of interest fell down and your income went up. So this is a negative relation, है ना. This is a negative relation. So that is why we have a negative slope of the IS curve. So key point from this slope discussion is that the slope is negative. That is, as interest rate falls, your income increases. As interest rate increases, your income falls. Okay, another thing from this we got to know is that your slope of investment curve is your slope of IC. That is, if investment curve is steep, IC will be steep. If investment curve is flatter, IC will be flatter. Now slope of investment curve is clear relationship between rate of interest increase, investment decrease, and vice versa. Okay, so this is about the slope of IC. तो अब हम बात करते हैं इसकी पॉलिसी इम्प्लीकेशन की. पॉलिसी इम्प्लीकेशंस आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड मोस्ट ऑफ द कॉम्पिटिटिव एग्जामिनेशन क्वेश्चंस आर बेस्ड ऑन दीज ओनली. दैट व्हाट विल हैपन इफ द गवर्नमेंट इज गोइंग टू increase the money supply, if the government is going to decrease the money supply, what will happen if the IS is flatter, if IS is steeper, LM is flatter, LM is steeper. So all those things are being asked. So the first case we talk about is of fiscal policy. So fiscal policy means कि गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर इंक्रीज़ होगा, गवर्नमेंट एक्सपेंडिचर डिक्रीज़ होगा, है ना. टैक्सेस इंक्रीज़ होंगे, टैक्सेस डिक्रीज़ होंगे. दैट इज़ फिस्कल पॉलिसी. सो व्हेन फिस्कल पॉलिसी विल चेंज, से दैट G increases. Okay, so our IC will shift this side, है ना. IC will shift. Now what will happen is that rate of interest will increase from R1 to R2. With this increase, our output also increases. Okay, our output also increases. Now this part with the actual increase, if the interest rate would have been here only, if the interest rate was R1 only, then our output would have been increased from R1 from Y1 to Y3. But because interest rate increases, there is a crowding out of some investment, which causes a fall in the output from Y3 to Y2 due to this increase in interest rate. So what government expenditure causes is crowding out, and it is caused due to your increase in interest rate. So your increase in interest rate in a fiscal policy causes crowding out. So your policy is effective, but not as effective as it could be due to crowding out. Okay, so this is your analysis of your fiscal policy. Now next comes your monetary policy. With monetary policy, say government increases your this money supply. Government increases money supply, it will mean that your LM curve will shift to the right. When your LM curve will shift to the right, your interest rate will fall and your output will increase. Okay, so there is no crowding out in the monetary policy case. Okay, now we are talking about a case where your LM curve is vertical. Okay, your LM curve is vertical, this case, and your government expenditure increases. So when your government expenditure increases, your IS curve shifts from IS to IS1. Okay, with this shift, your output should have been increased to y1 if it would have been at the same level. But what happens due to the LM curve being vertical? The interest rate increases, and it increases to the extent that there is a complete crowding out of increased investment by government. There is no benefit of government investing when the LM curve is vertical, because all the investment will go back, will be crowded out due to the increase in your interest rate. Okay, so in such scenarios a policy mix is recommended, where some monetary policy changes are done and some fiscal policy changes are done. Okay, these things, how these slopes, how the slope of IS affects your this thing, your effectiveness and ineffectiveness of your monetary policy. So how do we decide this? So when your slope is higher, it means that investment is highly responsive to the interest rate. Your investment is highly responsive to your interest rate. That is, if interest rate increases by 1 unit, then it may be that your investment is increasing by 10 units. So there is a very high volatility in investment with respect to the interest rate changes. There is a very high elasticity. On the other hand, low elasticity would mean that अगर यहाँ पे 1 से increase हुआ है तो investment might have increased by only 0.5. So that means low elasticity. So now when it is highly elastic, when your investment is highly elastic, है ना, when your investment is highly elastic, it will lead to more significant impact on your investment spending, and there will be a larger effect on equilibrium level. So when your IS is flatter, your monetary policy will be more effective than the normal case. Like we saw here this case, right? If IS was more steeper here, so our effect on increasing the output would have been more. Theoretically we are talking about it. Okay, in similar way we talk about other things also. So see here we first point we said that the flatter is the IS curve, the more effective will be our monetary policy. As I explained right now also, that flatter IS curve means more elastic investment curve, है ना, that is higher significant impact of interest rate on your investment spending. Another point which it puts here is that the steeper is the LM curve, the more effective will be our monetary policy. Why? Because steep LM curve means that money demand is insensitive to the interest rate. Steep LM curve will mean that money demand is insensitive. That is, see ऐसे होगी अगर LM curve है ना steep. So from where it is coming? It is coming from our this curves ना, these curves. So it will mean that it is less sensitive, or you can say insensitive to the interest rate. So fall in interest rate will do nothing. A fall in interest rate will do nothing, and it will not increase the demand for money, which will imply that there is not going to be any increase in the output also. So what we saw here, that steep LM means ineffective monetary policy, and here we saw that flat IS means effective monetary policy. Okay, now some other cases we can also talk about here is that, say, steeper IS curve. Okay, steeper IS curve. A steep IS curve is more effective in our fiscal policy, as steep IS means that investment is insensitive, right? Investment is insensitive to the interest rate, and increase will not crowd out any private investment, है ना? Increase will not crowd out any private investment. Now how are we seeing this? We are seeing this जब हमने ऐसे वाला केस देखा था ना, ये वाला. So यहाँ पर crowding out was this much. Okay, now when we have a steeper case, the crowding out will be only this much. This little part will be crowded out only. Okay, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट फिजिकल पॉलिसी हेयर, नॉट मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी. पहले हमने ऊपर जो बात करी दैट फ्लैट IS in case of monetary policy is more effective, right? In case of monetary policy it is more effective. If I show you by a diagram here, so that point flatter is like this with monetary policy would be more effective in case it was like this. Okay, that is what the first point was saying. It said that flat is means monetary policy effective, steep is means fiscal policy effective. You have to remember these things, because either you can remember this or you can keep the concept very clear so that you can draw the graph at any time and you can understand them. So these two, flat is you have to use monetary policy, steep is you have to use fiscal policy. Okay, now last point is that the flatter is the LM, more effective is the fiscal policy. Okay, flatter is the LM, more effective is the fiscal policy, because flatter LM means that money demand is more sensitive to the interest rate. Flatter LM means money demand is more sensitive to the interest rate. So any increase in the rate of interest will increase the money demand by a higher amount. Okay, so if I collectively write all this, I have written here also that if IS curve is steep, है ना, steep IS, look here, steep IS, अभी डायग्राम बना के बताया. If IS curve is steep, your fiscal policy is more effective, right? Your fiscal policy is more effective and monetary policy will be the opposite of that. Okay, remember this, monetary policy is going to be the opposite of fiscal policy. If IS is flat, okay, if IS is flat, your monetary policy is effective, ऊपर हमने करा, और fiscal policy क्या होगी, ineffective होगी. Now for LM if we see these things, if your LM is flat, then your monetary policy is ineffective. Okay, flat LM है ना, flat LM में what is effective here, fiscal policy is effective, opposite monetary policy is ineffective. steep LM ऊपर हमने देखा था अभी that monetary policy is effective, fiscal policy is ineffective. So these things you have to learn. Okay, now let me explain using the diagrams that what I just said. So if your IS is steep, it means that it is inelastic, which means that your AD is very less responsive to the changes in the interest rate. Okay, so here in fiscal policy case I told that when IS is steep, fiscal policy is effective. Now you can see here that only this much crowding out is happening. Okay, if from here the output changes to this level, say this is y2, y1 से y2 जाएगा and comes back to only this much only, so it is very effective. From earlier जब हमने देखा था तो the crowding out only was this much, है ना, यहाँ कहीं पर आ रही थी crowding out, but now you see that crowding out is very very less. When IS is steep, then the monetary policy is ineffective, we said so. So if IS is steep, this is our IS, when IS is steep, changes in the monetary policy, that is increase of money supply, LM यहाँ shift होगा to LM1 and only this much of increase in output is happening. So that is why the monetary policy is ineffective. Now moving ahead, we see the case when IS is flat. Okay, so IS is very flat, यहाँ पे देख सकते हैं काफ़ी flat बनाया. The flatter the IS will be, the more pronounced the effects will be, the effects that we are talking about. Okay, so we said earlier that the fiscal policy is ineffective when IS is flatter. So flat है. Now see, यहाँ से यहाँ जाता है, but due to the increase in the interest rate, this much of crowding out has happened. So this is ineffective because output was supposed to increase by this much, but it only increased to this much. Y to Y3 is the only increase, while it should have increased from Y to Y2. Okay, so that is why it is ineffective. When IS is flatter, your fiscal policy is ineffective. Now flatter IS means elastic IS, so AD is highly responsive to interest rates. Okay, now in case of monetary policy, when your IS is flat, your monetary policy will be effective. See, output has increased as much as it should have increased. Okay, so this is effective. Now let's move to the LM part. Okay, in LM part, LM curve flatter means that LM curve is elastic. So elastic LM curve means that money demand is highly responsive to the interest rate. मनी डिमांड पे इंटरेस्ट रेट का काफ़ी ज़्यादा फ़र्क पड़ रहा है, ठीक है, ये मतलब है LM के फ्लैट होने का। तो वी सी LM इज़ वेरी फ्लैट, फिजिकल पॉलिसी इज़ वेरी इफेक्टिव, देयर इज़ नो क्राउडिंग आउट, पूरा गया है ना। इन दिस इलास्टिक केस, ऑल्दो दिस इज़ नॉट वेरी इलास्टिक, इससे भी ज़्यादा इलास्टिक हो सकता था ये, एंड द इफेक्ट वुड हैव बीन इवन लेसर, देन मॉनेटरी पॉलिसी वुड हैव बीन इवन मोर इनइफेक्टिव. सो the increase in the output is not very much when we will compare it to the LM. If it had been the actual, there is a small mistake in this diagram. Okay, now moving to the LM steeper case. Okay, LM steeper means that it is inelastic, that is money demand will be responsive to the interest rates. Money demand will be less responsive to the interest rates. Okay, money demand will be less responsive to the interest rate when LM is steeper. That is the meaning of inelastic है. तो inelastic में fiscal policy is ineffective, we can clearly see it, only the small increase in output, but monetary policy is effective. With that also we can see that serious changes has happened here also. Okay, so that is what the policy implications are. All these different cases are asked differently at different times in all these examinations of different universities, of different competitive examinations. Such questions are continuously being asked, that what will happen if IS curve is very inelastic and your monetary policy is applied and money supply is increased. So what will be the effect? Will it be effective or ineffective? Such policy questions are many times asked. So you should know about these things. So that's it for this video also. Thank you.